I think the reason why I wrote this book was because for 10 years I've been writing about the internet, and one of the things that always interested me is people kept saying about how it was the future and how it was creating a new society and a new world. But one of the things that always interested me was the way that they were recycling futures from the past. I started doing this research and started digging and digging and digging, and it came back to the 1960s, or late 50s, early 1960s really. And what I realised is that these imaginary futures are a way that people understand the present. And so the way we understand the present is not really what's going on here and now, it's actually as a sort of anticipation of some better times to come. So that's what I did. I started looking at that, and so one of the things is it's a sort of history of the future, and it's particularly a history of the information society as the prophecy of the future. It's not an accident that ARPA, the Advanced Research Projects Agency, were the people who funded the internet's technical development. And that's because they were set up to stop another Sputnik. And so the next key technology that they identified was the internet. They thought the Russians were inventing the internet. What we have to then think about is why were the Russians thinking about inventing the internet? And this is because a group of reformers around Khrushchev thought that the internet was a way of solving the problems of the Stalinist economy. The utopian plan, which they called cybernetic communism. And that is what the information society is. It's basically the American replacement for cybernetic communism. One of the things that the book looks at is the way that the people who invented the concept of the information society are a very particular group within American society. They were this Cold War left, and so they took the choice basically that it was better to collaborate with democratic imperialism in America than it was with totalitarian imperialism in Russia. And so they then became people who tried to create a progressive vision of America. And so one of the things that they wanted to do was to take on what they regarded as the sort of heavyweight champion of the peasant revolution, which was the Vietnamese. So it was this progressive left of centre government that in 1965 invaded Vietnam. And so they thought they had the high-tech weaponry to actually beat them. And of course what's interesting about this is actually the Vietnamese actually won the war. And unless you actually look at the history of the future, you don't realise that you're basically being asked to repeat the same thing. America was supposed to have entered the information society 7 years ago, and Western Europe was supposed to follow a few years later. So we're living in it in a way. The future is now, but it's not the future that they predicted. Sense we need to free ourselves from the illusion that simply by having more technology we can solve our problems, and realise that these are tools that we have to shape in our own interest, and it's a question of who gets to shape them. And a new civilization is changing the world that we live in, not just the ways that we communicate about what we're living in.